Be part of a church community. Part 4 of Jesus' teaching. Hello, 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 my friend. This is Clyde, and it is a great joy to be with you today and to dive into scriptures to learn something that Jesus handed down to be shared with new converts. This was nearly 2,000 years ago, and here we are in the 21st century, and we're still being exposed to Jesus' teachings that have been passed on through many generations. Today, I want us to look at the matter of a church community. Watch this. The events of the day of Pentecost, as recorded in Acts chapter 2, were unusual. That day, the Holy Spirit turned up as Jesus had promised, and 120 persons became foundation members of the Church of Jesus. By the end of that day, that number was increased by a whopping 3,000 persons. Do you see a potential problem? What do you do with now 3,120 persons just from the first day? They devoted themselves to the apostles' teachings and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. Acts 2 and verse 42. In other words, they started to have church. They started to build a community. Did Jesus teach them that? Let us go back over the last 3.5 years of Jesus' ministry as he hung out with some guys. When Jesus came back from the 40 days fasting in the wilderness, he settled in one of the towns in Galilee, and that became his home base. From there, he started to go around and teaching in the temple and in the synagogues and started to recruit followers. Among the earliest were 3 young men, Simon Peter, James, and John. He simply invited these fishermen to follow him, and he would make them to become fishers of people. Luke 5 verses 1 to 11. Over a short period of time, Jesus added 9 others to the number and capped it off as 12 disciples. For the next 3.5 years, these young men, all Galileans just like Jesus, became known as his followers or his disciples. They went everywhere together. They were with him when he performed great miracles, when he fed thousands of people with a few bread loaves and 2 sardine-sized fishes, when he went to Jerusalem every year for the feast of the Passover. They were with Jesus, or Jesus was with them, when the boat they were sailing in one day on the Sea of Galilee was caught in a storm, and Jesus spoke to the elements, and the storm died immediately. They witnessed Jesus raising some dead folks, and they were together when Jesus introduced communion to them and told them to do that as often as possible in remembrance of him. In Luke chapter 9, Jesus did a form of apprenticeship when he divided them in pairs and sent them out to some neighboring communities to preach and heal the sick, and they came back with some great success stories. Jesus really taught them by example to become a community of brothers who would work together and hang out together and do ministry together. In fact, in John 17, before he was crucified, Jesus prayed for them that they would be united together as one. So based on their experience with Jesus over a little more than 36 months without any break, these guys knew community life. They enjoyed community life. They were more effective in community life. So when the church was launched by the Holy Spirit on the day of Pentecost, and later that day 3,000 souls were added to the original 120, it did not take them long, and it did not take them much planning to form a church with that number. And they practiced meeting regularly, and so they would learn the teachings of Jesus together, they would pray together, they would break bread together, and they would do life together. In fact, further on in Acts 2, we read that every day they would meet together in the temple courts, and their numbers grew rapidly. As you read more about the early church of the first century, they began to face some massive pushback from authorities, and they were persecuted. Some were arrested for preaching about Jesus, and so the large numbers became splintered as some people sought to escape the persecution by going to other towns and cities. But guess what? Everywhere they went and settled, they ended up preaching the gospel and started new churches in these new areas. After a while, Jerusalem became the central church, their headquarters, and they reported churches as far as Rome to the east, to the west, and parts of Asia to the east. Now you understand why we have churches today. Because Jesus taught the disciples how important being part of a community of believers is. And those early disciples, they practiced it. They taught new converts about the importance of being part of a local church. And new churches were being created all over. It worked, my friend. I'm talking about the early disciples, and they took what Jesus taught them and they taught it to new converts, and that has been going on for the last 2,000 years. Today, there are approximately 350,000 registered Christian churches in the United States and approximately 37 million Christian churches worldwide. That is the power of teaching and leading by example. I hope you're part of a local church in your city. It is very useful in helping you to grow stronger as a Christian, and it provides you with a steady community where you can do ministry together with other Christians. It really is an amazing thing to experience, and to think that we are doing today what Jesus taught the early disciples 2,000 years ago. If you have enjoyed this teaching, please hit the like button below and also hit share and send this message to some friends. Also, go ahead and hit subscribe so that you can get these daily messages sent directly to you. See you tomorrow.